You bring it home on a Monday afternoon. The bunch is still damp from the produce mist at the market, wrapped in a thin rubber band, stems pointing down in a way that no one really planned. The leaves are bright, that particular shade of green that makes you think of spring, even in the dead of February. You set it on the counter while you unpack the rest of the groceries, then open the refrigerator and slide it into the crisper drawer without much thought. The same drawer where things go when you mean to use them soon. Wednesday, you open the drawer to grab something else, and you smell it before you see it. That sharp, slightly sour edge that cilantro gets when it has been sitting too long in trapped moisture. You pull the bunch out. The outer leaves are dark at the tips, soft in the way that means they are already going. The stems are wet. Some of the leaves near the bottom of the bag are pressed flat against the plastic, beginning to dissolve into themselves. You rinse it anyway, hope for the best. Pick through what is still usable. Maybe you save a quarter of what you bought. The rest goes into the trash. If that has happened to you once, it has probably happened a dozen times. And each time, it is not just the herb that is lost. It is the recipe you planned around it. The meal that did not come together the way you imagined. The small frustration of spending money on something and watching it die in a drawer. I have thought about that a lot over the years. Not because I am someone who obsesses over small things, but because in a household like the one I grew up in, small things added up fast. Wasted food was not just inconvenient. It was a sign that something had been done wrong, and we were expected to figure out what that was and not repeat it. My name is Samuel. I have lived most of my life in a rural part of Pennsylvania, and the kitchen I grew up in was run by women who did not accept spoilage as something that simply happened. They treated it as a problem to be solved, the same way you solve a leaking roof or a broken fence. You find out why it is happening, and then you stop it from happening again. Cilantro was one of those herbs that gave people trouble. Still does. The reason is simple, though most people never quite put their finger on it. They assume the herb is delicate by nature, that it just goes fast, that there is nothing to be done. But that is not what the old kitchens found. What they found was that cilantro doesn't die from time alone. It dies from moisture it cannot escape, from cold it was not prepared for, from being left in conditions that suit a plastic bag, but not a living plant. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how to choose the right bunch at the market, how to handle it the moment you come through the door, how to keep it fresh in the refrigerator for weeks, how to freeze it properly, and how to dry it so it stays usable for close to a year. This is not one trick. It is a system, a set of related habits that, together, make the difference between a herb that dies in 3 days and one that lasts. Before we talk about storage, we have to talk about selection. Because everything that happens to cilantro after you buy it depends entirely on what you chose at the market in the first place. A bunch that is already halfway gone when you pick it up will not be saved by any method in the world. Look at the stems first, not the leaves. People always check the leaves because the leaves are what they see and what they use. But the stems tell the real story. A fresh bunch of cilantro has stems that are firm and pale green, almost white near the base. Press one gently between 2 fingers. There should be resistance. When stems feel hollow or soft or bend easily without snapping back, that bunch has been sitting too long. Next, smell the bunch. Fresh cilantro has a clean, sharp brightness to it. Some people call it citrusy, some call it soapy, but either way, it should be alive and immediate. What you do not want is anything flat, dull, or with that faintly fermented quality that tells you moisture has been doing damage somewhere inside the pile. You will know the difference once you find a fresh bunch next to an old one. Check the cut ends at the base of the stems. In a truly fresh bunch, those ends look recently trimmed, not browned, not dried out, not pulling inward. A darkened cut end means this herb has been sitting in a warehouse or a delivery. Truck longer than you want. And press the center of the bunch gently with your hand. The outside edges of a bunch can look fine, while the middle is already collapsing. A fresh bunch is consistent all the way through. An old one has a soft spot hiding where you cannot see it from the outside. The old farm women I knew would spend more time at the produce stall than anyone around them. Not because they were slow, because they were paying attention. They knew that everything after the buying depends on the buying itself. You are home now. The bunch is on the counter. This is the moment that decides how long you have it. And it is where most people make the mistake that costs them the whole bunch by Thursday. The mistake is putting cilantro directly into cold, straight from room temperature into the drawer, still bundled, still damp, still wrapped in whatever the store put it in. What that does is trap moisture between the leaves in a place with no airflow. The cold does not slow decay equally across the whole bunch. It slows the surface while the center, packed tight and wet, begins to break down. The leaves at the core get soft first. Then the soft spreads. Within 2 or 3 days, what started as a bright, firm bunch has a wet, collapsing middle. When you come home, the first thing you do is remove the rubber band or twist tie. Let the bunch breathe on the counter for a few minutes. Do not wash it. This is a point worth repeating. Do not wash cilantro before you store it. Water on stored herbs is one of the primary reasons herbs die quickly. Moisture clings to leaves, sits in the folds, cannot evaporate in a closed container, and becomes the beginning of decay. Wash only what you are about to cook with. Everything going into storage stays dry. Go through the bunch with your hands. Remove any leaves that are already soft, dark, or showing the first signs of damage. Do not be sentimental about it. One failing leaf pressed against a healthy one will transfer that softness within a day. Pull out what does not belong. If the cut ends look dried or browned, trim about 1/4 inch off the stems with a clean knife. This opens the cells at the base, so the herb can take up a little water the way a cut flower does. There are 2 ways to keep fresh cilantro in the refrigerator, and which one suits you depends on how fast you go through it. The first is what I think of as the flower jar method. Take a clean glass or jar, something with enough height for the stems. Pour about 1 inch of cold water into the bottom. Stand the trimmed stems in the water so the cut ends are submerged, but the leaves rise above the rim. Take a clean plastic bag, loose, and drape it over the top of the herb like a tent. Do not seal it down. You want air moving, not trapped. Place this in the back of the refrigerator, away from the door where temperatures swing every time someone opens it. This works because you are treating the cilantro more like a living plant than like a vegetable in a bag. The stems draw water up from below. The leaves stay dry. The loose bag creates a gentle humidity around the herb without pressing moisture against it. Change the water every 2 days. A bunch stored this way will often last 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes longer if the original bunch was truly fresh. The second method is the paper towel wrap. This is better for people who want to save drawer space or who plan to use the cilantro in stages over a shorter stretch. Lay a paper towel flat. Set the cilantro across it loosely. Do not pack the bunch tight. Fold the towel gently over the herbs, then roll it into a loose cylinder. Slide it into a zip-top bag, but leave a small opening at one end. Place it in the crisper drawer. The paper towel does 2 things. It absorbs any surface moisture before it can sit against the leaves. and it creates a slight buffer between the herb and the cold wall of the drawer. When the towel feels damp, swap it for a dry one. 10 days to 2 weeks of good, usable cilantro is reasonable from this method when you start with a fresh bunch. Both methods rest on the same idea. The enemy is not time. The enemy is moisture with nowhere to go. So far, we have covered 3 important things. You chose a good bunch by checking stems, smell, cut ends, and the center. You came home and let it breathe before doing anything. And you chose a storage method that manages moisture instead of trapping it. Those 3 steps alone will give you more usable cilantro than most people see from a single purchase. But the refrigerator is only the beginning. If you want cilantro to last months instead of weeks, you need to think about preservation. There are 2 methods worth knowing: freezing and drying, and they serve different purposes in the kitchen. Freezing cilantro is one of the most practical things a cook can do, but it has to be done correctly. Frozen cilantro done wrong becomes a dark, mushy clump that falls apart when thawed and carries almost no flavor. That happens because water in the cells expands when frozen, breaks the cell walls, and when it thaws, the structure collapses entirely. The difference between good frozen cilantro and bad frozen cilantro is this: dryness before freezing. Wash the cilantro right before freezing. This is one of the only times washing before storage is correct. Rinse it gently, then dry it thoroughly. Not a few shakes over the sink. Spread it on a clean kitchen towel, pat it carefully, and then let it air dry at room temperature for 30 minutes until you cannot see any surface moisture. This step is not optional. It is the step that decides whether the result is useful or wasted. Once the cilantro is fully dry, spread the leaves or small sprigs in a single layer on a baking sheet lined with parchment. Do not let them touch. Put the sheet in the freezer for 1 to 2 hours until everything is frozen solid. This flash freezing step keeps the pieces separate so you can pull out exactly what you need without prying apart a frozen block. Transfer the frozen pieces into a labeled freezer bag, press out the air, and seal it. Cilantro frozen this way keeps well for 4 to 6 months. It will not be the same as fresh off the plant, but in soups, stews, beans, curries, and rice dishes, it performs beautifully. The second freezing approach works especially well for people who cook a lot of sauces and liquid-based dishes. Wash and dry the cilantro, then blend the leaves with a small amount of olive oil. Just enough to help the blade move, never water. Water causes ice crystal damage and speeds oxidation. Oil carries flavor and protects during freezing. Pour the paste into ice cube trays, freeze until solid, then pop the cubes out into a labeled freezer bag. Drop 1 cube directly into whatever you are cooking. The oil melts, the herb releases into the dish, and the result is closer to using fresh than any other preservation method achieves in a hot pan. The oldest method of all is drying, and it is the one that comes closest to giving you a true year's supply from a single purchase. Dried cilantro is not the same as fresh. It is worth saying plainly. The volatile compounds that give fresh cilantro its bright sharpness begin to diminish once the plant is harvested, and drying drives some of that off further. What you are left with is something more mellow, more suited to long-cooked dishes than to fresh preparations. In stews, soups, rice, beans, and braised meats, dried cilantro adds a quieter depth. For salsas, guacamole, and anything eaten raw, you want fresh. Understanding that difference helps you decide what to dry and what to use quickly. The simplest drying method is air drying, and it asks almost nothing from you except time. Take small bunches, not large ones because the center of a thick bunch will not dry before mold has a chance to develop. Tie the stems at the base with kitchen twine. Hang them upside down in a spot that has good airflow, moderate warmth, and low humidity. A dry porch, a pantry with ventilation, a corner of a room that gets indirect light but not direct sun. Avoid hanging herbs near a stove, where cooking steam will slow the process and work against you. Leave them for 1 to 2 weeks. You are looking for leaves that feel papery and crisp, stems that snap cleanly. If anything still bends without breaking, it needs more time. Incomplete drying is the main reason home-dried herbs develop mold in the jar. When in doubt, wait a few more days. Once fully dry, crumble the leaves away from the stems and store them in a clean glass jar with a tight lid. Keep the jar in a cool, dark place, away from the stove, away from direct light. Label it with the date. Dried cilantro stored this way will remain usable for close to a year. The potency fades gradually after 6 months, so smell the jar before you use it. If you rub a pinch between your fingers and it releases a clear, recognizable scent, it still has something to give. If it smells like dusty paper, it has run its course. If you prefer a faster method, the oven works well. Set it to its lowest possible temperature, somewhere between 95 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Spread clean, thoroughly dried cilantro in a single layer on a baking sheet. Prop the oven door open slightly to let moisture escape. Check it every half hour. 2 to 4 hours is typical, depending on the thickness of the stems and how much moisture they started with. Do not raise the temperature to hurry the process. Heat that is too high will cook the herb rather than dry it, burning off the oils that give it flavor and leaving you with something that is dry in texture but flat in taste. Low and slow preserves more than fast and forced. The old kitchens understood this, even without knowing the science behind it. There is one more preservation method that belongs in this conversation, and that is making cilantro paste for freezing. This is particularly useful if you grow cilantro in a garden or buy it in generous amounts and find yourself with more than the refrigerator can manage before it starts to turn. Wash and dry the cilantro well, as dry as you would for the flash freezing method. Place the leaves in a blender or food processor with a small amount of olive oil, just enough to help the blade move smoothly. Do not add water. Water causes ice crystal damage during freezing and speeds up oxidation in storage. The olive oil protects the paste and carries the flavor directly into cooking. Process until you have a smooth, bright green paste. Spoon it into ice cube trays, cover loosely, and freeze until solid. Transfer the cubes into a labeled freezer bag. These cilantro paste cubes will keep for up to 6 months and drop directly into soups, curries, grain dishes, egg dishes, or any sauce that welcomes that green, herbal depth. The result is noticeably closer to cooking with fresh cilantro than using dried herb from a jar, because the oil has preserved the volatile compounds that drying drives off. It is one of the more practical things a household cook can have waiting in the freezer, and it costs almost nothing to prepare when you have more cilantro than you can use fresh. Before we get to the mistakes, I want to say something about the relationship between these habits and real life. Because when you read them all together like this, it can seem like a great deal of effort for a bunch of herbs. But in practice, none of this takes more than 10 minutes when you bring cilantro home. The selection at the market is a matter of looking more carefully at something you were already picking up. The setup at home, removing the wrapper, trimming the stems, standing the bunch in a jar, takes less time than it takes to unpack the rest of the groceries. The flash freezing takes a few minutes of active work, and then several hours of doing nothing. The drying takes even less active work. Most of it is simply waiting. What changes is attention. And that is what the old kitchens had in abundance. My wife has a way of checking the cilantro jar that she does almost without thinking. She will open the refrigerator to get something else, and while she is there, her eye goes to the jar. Is the water still clear? Are the stems still firm where they disappear into the water? Are the leaves on top still holding their shape? She will change the water if it has gone cloudy, pull out a stem that has started to soften, adjust the loose bag if it has slipped. The whole thing takes 30 seconds. But it happens 3 or 4 times a week, and it is what keeps things fresh when they would otherwise be forgotten. Her mother did the same thing with the whole pantry. Not a formal inspection, just a glance while she was moving through the kitchen. A hand running over the onions in the basket to feel if any had gone soft. A look at the garlic hanging by the window to see if any cloves had shriveled more than the others. A quick check of the jar on the shelf to see whether the dried herbs had lost their scent. It was not a chore. It was the kind of looking that becomes invisible when it becomes habit. That is the deeper thing these storage methods teach, if you let them. Not just how to keep cilantro longer, but how to stay in relationship with the food in your kitchen instead of ignoring it until it fails. There are a few mistakes worth naming. Directly, because they undo otherwise good efforts. Storing cilantro near apples, bananas, tomatoes, or other ethylene-producing fruits is one of the most common. Ethylene is a natural ripening gas, and it accelerates decay in nearby produce. A ripe apple-sharing refrigerator space with your herb bundle will noticeably shorten the herb's life. Keep them apart. Washing and then immediately refrigerating without drying is another. You introduce surface moisture and then seal it in cold where it cannot evaporate. The result is predictable, and it happens quickly. Using a container that is sealed too tight is a third. Herbs need some movement of air. A completely airtight container lets ethylene build up around the plant and speeds breakdown. The loose bag in the jar method works because it breathes. Even zip-top bags stored with a small opening matter. And the last one is forgetting to check. A bunch stored properly on Monday can still be compromised by Friday if one soft stem was hiding in the center when you put it away. The old pantry habit was not to forget things once they were stored. It was to look in on them regularly, not every hour, but as part of the rhythm of the week. A quick look, a quick smell, removing anything that has started to turn before it can reach what is still good. That habit, more than any single technique, is what kept old kitchens from losing food. Let me draw a picture of what this looks like when all of it comes together. You walk into the market and take your time at the herb table. You check stems for firmness, smell for brightness, cut ends for color, center of the bunch for softness. You leave with the best choice on the display. At home, you remove the wrapping, let the bunch breathe, remove what is already soft, and trim the stem ends. You stand it in a jar of cold water with a loose bag draped over the top and set it in the back of the refrigerator. You change the water every 2 days. When you know you will not use the whole bunch fresh, you set a portion aside for freezing. You dry it carefully, flash freeze it on a sheet, transfer it to a labeled bag. Or you blend it with oil and fill cube trays. Either way, you have cilantro waiting for months ahead. If you have more than that, from a garden in summer or a generous market find, you hang small bunches in a dry room for 2 full weeks, crumble the dried leaves into a clean glass jar, label it, and store it away from heat and light. Fresh, 3 weeks with care. Frozen, 4 to 6 months. Dried, close to a year. That is the system. None of it requires anything special. A jar, a paper towel, a clean knife, a bit of patience. The old kitchen was not smarter because it had more tools. It was smarter because it paid attention to things that are easy to overlook when convenience is always available. And sometimes, returning to those old habits makes a genuine difference, not just in the pantry, but in the way a household feels when food is not wasted, when meals come together the way they were planned, and when the knowledge that kept kitchens running for generations is still being used. Tell me in the comments which herb gives you the most trouble. Is it cilantro, parsley, basil, dill, or something else entirely? And if someone in your family had their own way of keeping herbs fresh, something your grandmother did with a cloth, or the way someone in your house hung things to dry in the summer, write it down here. Those small household habits have a way of disappearing when nobody says them out loud. I would like to hear them. Next time, I will show you how old pantries kept onions from sprouting and going soft through the winter, and why most of the mistakes people make with onions happen the moment they bring them home from the store. That one has some surprises in it.